Hey, what's going on, everyone? Check out what's coming up this week on Legacies. Why are we afraid of this? Like,
Yeah, so it's a backward step is what it feels
it's
like.
completely backwards. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
This is going to sound really pretentious, but technically it was them persuading me.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
All right.
they-
Yeah. I did. I took my
so
dab
maybe
break.
you're just so blasted. You're like, oh, come on, mosquitoes.
Oh fuck!
Whatever.
I'm a bit of a dab champion now. I'm just saying, you know.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to Legacies. I'm your host, Tom Ritchie. Joining me, as usual, co-host, executive producer, Mr. Wesley Bowles. Wes, how you doing?
Good morning. Pretty good. Yourself?
I'm good. I'm not going to lie. I'm a bit tired. I got a story for you. I've been saving it. I know we connect and we do all these things. I got a story. So, you know the boys, Gordy and Randy.
Mhm.
And we got a fucking skunk in the backyard, buddy.
Come on.
Yeah, there is. So the neighbors alerted us to this early this week. I think it might have even been Canada Day or the day before, that there's a skunk under our shed, that shed that's way back in the corner. And apparently it's smaller or whatever, and maybe tried to spray at the neighbor's dog. And I can't know. I don't know if you remember, but there's dogs like completely surrounding our entire property. So anyways, so I'm like, okay, call my buddy Jerry. There's a guy that's got literally everything. It's my friend Jerry. So I'm like, do you got a live trap? He's like, yep, of course I do. He's literally got fucking everything. I'm like, okay, I need it. I got a skunk I got to deal with. So had it out for a couple nights. And last night, right before bed, I haven't been able to trap it obviously yet. And right before bed, 11:30, take him out. And Gordy just beelines it for the fence. And I'm like, oh, fuck. 2 seconds later, Randy's in there too. They're squabbling. All of a sudden, I hear barking. And then they come out and all I can smell, dude,
It's bad. It's horrible.
I could not fucking breathe. I could not. And I don't even think it's big. And so, like, I'm flipping out, right? And I don't know what the fuck to do. I mean, I do, but I don't. Like, it's in the moment. So, like, Gordy is the worst. I didn't think Randy got sprayed at first. So I grab him and I'm like, you're due. Like, they got sprayed. And Danny's like, oh my God. So, anyways, immediately moved to the peroxide baking soda dish soap solution, which, thank you, ChatGPT. Quick search with that, and it told me exactly what to do. I told it how much I've got, gave me the solution. I've got Gordy on the deck, just saturating him with this solution. It fucking works so well.
Did it get him in the face?
It did. That's where he was the worst, right? So I'm like, oh my God, like this poor dog. And I'm leaving him outside while I'm gathering stuff. And I feel so bad because he's probably just like flipping out, not sure what to do. Did they abandon me? What's going on? So anyways, I get him all saturated. You got to let him sit in the stuff for like 5 to 10 minutes. I got him out on the deck. And then finally, thank God, like I've got a hose up to where we are and I'm rinsing him off. Then I bring him in, I give him a bath and then wash my hair because all I could smell was skunk. Like it's like in me, right? Needless to say, skunk 1, Tom 0 so far. So now they got to be on leashes every time they go out until fucking thing.
We had that at the house I used to live at. We had one where there was a crawl space underneath our house, and I woke up one morning at 3 a.m. to the smell of it. I freaked out because I was like, it's so strong. I feel like it's in the bedroom right now. And I was worried. I was like, I didn't want to step on the floor. It was pitch black.
Yeah.
Anyway, found out in the morning that a family of them had buried under the house
God.
into the crawl space. Anyway, it was like thousands of dollars to get the foundation covered up and all that stuff. But in the process of that, yeah, the dog we had at the time got sprayed had its mouth open, bit the skunk's ass, and
oh my God, drank from the
straight
fire
shot
hose.
into yeah. And it was like the dog was foaming at the mouth.
Oh my God.
And yeah, that shit, I don't feel for you because it's
well, listen,
no matter how much you wash, it sticks around for weeks.
I'm telling you, like, so, the old thought philosophy was tomato juice and all this stuff. Well, it said right up, do not, like, Tandy's like, don't get it wet. Don't get them wet. Tomato juice apparently just masks it. Anyone listening, if you run into this issue, get some peroxide, get some baking soda and dish soap. I'm telling you, it went away immediately, like immediately neutralized the smell. Um, but then you're thinking, because you open the door, right? And it's like right in our backyard. So you open the door and it's coming in. Oh yeah. So I threw all my clothes in the garage that I was wearing, handling them. And then on the way into the gym this morning, I'm like, okay, I took a whiff. And I'm like, oh yeah, they smell like 100%. They smell like skunk. But Gordy, he don't smell, which is crazy. So it was, we were up till like 1:30. That's what I was saying.
Oh, yeah.
I'm tired. Like yeah. Anyways, horrible. And then it's not like the skunk I want to smell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. That's for sure. Anyways, have you heard the movie? There's a movie out. I love biographies. It's Cabrini. Have you heard of this?
No.
So it's a long movie. It's a biography. It's about Mother Cabrini now. And I think it's Frances Xavier or something Cabrini. We should all have heard of her, but we don't for whatever reason. So Italian immigrant, originally, she was a nun, and she had petitioned the Vatican multiple times, and she's like, I want to do God's work. I want to save the children. I want to set up orphanages. I want to conquer the world. And she just wouldn't stop. She had wrote the Vatican like 15 times, 16 times, and finally just showed up and was like, I want to talk to His Holiness the Pope, and would not back down. So finally, he grants her, okay, you can do this, but I want you to start in America. And she's like, okay, well, I guess. So she goes to New York, goes to 5 Points, and starts working. And because what had happened was in those early days, 50s into, building of America, it was built on immigrant time and hands, and they didn't take care of them. So what happens is you have these families coming over that have children, or maybe made a family while they're here, and whatever, sickness, die on the job, like there's deaths, and all these kids end up orphaned, and the US government, they weren't paying attention. They didn't care. So she goes in, she starts, working with the local, I don't know, bishop or whatever it is, he was very resentful. He's like, no way, we're not doing this. This doesn't make any sense. You need to return to Rome. And she's just, you know, digging in, going, I ain't going anywhere. So anyways, she does all God's work and establishes orphanages and just continues to grow and grow and grow. And then she ends up back at in the Vatican speaking with the Pope, and she was sent back because she was arrested for this like peaceful protest or something going on. And anyways, fast forward, I don't want to spoil it, but we should know of Mother. It's Mother Cabrini now. She was canonized by the first. So because she had come to the U.S., she became a U.S. citizen. So she was an Italian American. But you would never have heard of her. I had never heard of her. The work that she ultimately ended up doing would trump the work of the Rockefellers and very similar families of the time, like orphanages across the world, massive amount. So anyways, she was canonized by the first American, because she was Italian American, but the first American ever canonized, 1947, long after her death. I think she died in, I don't know, 1917 or something like that. Anyways, needless to say, an incredible biography. Love biographies. This is one that you don't want to miss. I just, at the end, when they're going through the work that she had done, would outdo anything the Rockefellers and those types had ever built. I was like, oh my God. And you never hear of her. I've never heard of her.
Yeah.
Never heard of her.
Yeah, I didn't even know that movie was coming out. It's a shame. It looks like, so you enjoyed the movie though? It was a good movie?
Oh my God. It's a long movie. It took us a couple nights to watch it and get through it. But it needed to be that long for the amount of work that she had done. Like, it's just that the one thing that I love, and I always echo this back to our own work and what we do. And obviously we're not saints. We're not doing the work of God when it comes to that. But I just love that steadfastness. Just stick with it. I have a vision. This is what I'm going to do. And she was relentless. She would not stop. And, even going to the mayor, she couldn't get time with the New York mayor at the time. And she's like, she just kept going and going and going, and eventually got time. And she used his political agenda against him to be able to get voters on his side for the next reelection. And Finally managed to get support from the mayor and his office. But incredible story, just wild story. Everyone should understand this, and understand the Italian immigrants, and it's not just the Italians, it's the Polish, it's, there's so many other immigrants that had come, the Irish, to build America and then left for dead. Seriously, just not taken care of, left for dead. Their kids, orphaned, living in sewers, man, living in sewers. So anyways, check it out. Encourage anyone that's listening, check it out. It's definitely one of the better biographies I've seen in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it looks like they need the box office tickets because that movie's lost $30 million.
Oh man, it's
Budget was 50, box office was 20. Damn.
yeah. And again, it's one of these things where I think on the surface you look at it, unless you're really big into biographies. I don't know how well the story is told. I haven't done that research. I don't know if it's perfectly aligned, if it, kind of veers in the opposite direction, but I would assume that the vast majority of the facts are fact-based. Anyways, is really good. And how well it's performing box office, it's probably an indication of the vast majority of people don't care. They don't pay attention to this kind of stuff. Give me
Yeah,
action.
I didn't even know it existed. So I don't
Yeah,
know if
neither
the
did I.
marketing thing from the movie, but yeah, maybe
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
And I wonder if that's part of it, right? It's get to the end of that 50 million is like, okay, well, we don't really have any money left to market. I would suspect it's going to definitely win some sort of, I don't even know, what are the movie awards anymore?
Oscar would be the big one.
Oscars and yeah. Anyways, last week we touched on, I was thinking this morning a little bit about this. We touched on, because data, we deal a lot with companies that are dealing with data and understanding distribution. So last week, I think we had just mentioned it. OCS was going to be making, I think their subscriptions, I'm not sure, OCS, please correct us if this is wrong, but making more wholesale data, distribution data, I would think, available to LPs. Do you have context on that? Have you had a chance to look more into that?
Yeah, so it looks like the changes that are going to be happening. OCS currently has 2 tiers for their data platforms. Tier 1 would be Ontario data at a wholesale level, what it sounds like, and then Tier 2 would also grant you some access to, currently grants you access to competitor data potentially, right? But it looks like there are some changes happening to the Tier 1 plan, and a quote here from them is to offer greater visibility into specific authorized stores that are purchasing their products through the OCS. Yeah, basically allowing you to gain a little bit more insight, again, from specific stores at a wholesale level, on what SKUs they're stocking and how many and how many they're ordering and things like that. So it's just nice to see the OCS kind of jumping in to provide some of this data and potentially, I don't know, combating some of these data deals and things like that, which I think is important. Especially since it looks like Alberta and BC have offered similar programs to this already. So it's nice to see Ontario jumping in.
Well, and I think it's important for our audience that are not directly in the business, because we do have an audience that's outside that are consumers, and they don't necessarily understand the struggle of what these companies, the LPs, need to go through. They fly blind for the most part, especially within Ontario. So there are a lot of different data companies that you can subscribe to. Data, it's not data deals, it's subscribe to data and understand distribution and sales. A lot of it is scrape data. There's some companies that offer data that they have a direct plug into the POS. But if I'm an LP and I launch a brand into, let's say, Ontario, I do all of my work, my lead up, it's dropping, it's available on OCS wholesale. They basically have a blind spot understanding which dispensaries have now ordered my product to stock until or unless you are subscribed to some sort of data package. Again, not data deal, but data package to understand what is my distribution. I couldn't imagine that. Like we even within the media space, use a ton of data to understand our consumers, how well we're performing, and to put all this money into getting a product launched into a certain market and then be like, okay, well, I hope it sells.
Yeah.
I think it's going to sell. I don't know if it sells.
And I'm glad to see they're doing it too, because I feel like this is almost a prerequisite or requirement. It'd be different if we didn't have an OCS model and we had to do, direct to retail sales and things like that. And sure, you have to go to these different companies who specialize in aggregating data and stuff like that. But being quote unquote kind of forced to go through the OCS for a lot of this stuff. To me,
Yeah.
it's almost a requirement that they do offer this. Like
Yeah, I would think.
it makes sense, right? And I
Yeah.
think it benefits a lot of, especially those on flow through, right?
Mhm.
Being able to see which stores have ordered my product and how often and things like that. I think that's going to benefit because flow through is tough, right? And I think it's going to
Oh,
benefit
yeah.
those on flow through quite a bit.
Well, and I think, OCS, they're smart. They understand, they monitor a lot. They understand what the LPs are saying and, you know, flow through, I think, is a great opportunity where they're like, we can't bring on another general listing, but we can make it available through flow through. They'll monitor that. And if it's doing well, performing well, and they're seeing that the numbers are there, then chances are you may get a general listing out of it. But it can't be easy, right? Because
No,
they've got so many different brands and products and SKUs to curate to make available to the retailers. So yeah, I don't know. Keeping your finger on the pulse of what the market wants. Sheesh, that's tough.
yeah, and I guess we should also mention there too. The OCS is seeking industry feedback on this change through July 9th. So if you haven't already
Okay.
submitted your feedback to the OCS, make
6
sure you do that
days.
by 6 days by July 9th. If I could find a link of where they specifically want that feedback, I'll put it in the description. But otherwise, maybe we'll break this clip out, and if you see this clip on Instagram, just comment below because we know they
Yeah.
watch. So maybe
Yeah, and hopefully they've
feedback
reached
from
out to LPs direct too, just to say, "Hey, this is available. We're seeking feedback." Obviously, this is your livelihood. You need to be paying attention and making sure that you have a voice, and they're giving you an opportunity to have a voice. So there was also what was their June report. I don't have it up. I don't like touching stuff in case I screw something up, but there was some staggering numbers about the vape carts. I think was it like $33 million increase or something like that?
Yeah, so this is being extra careful this time given our last approach to OCS numbers, but I've got it here in front of me this time, so we'll take it slow. So this is their new vape, edible, and topical consumer insights. Yeah, so it was a $33 million, sorry, I'm going to quote the thing here, changes in authorized retail sales over the past 12 months. So $33 million increase in the vape category, $772,000 increase in the edibles category. And the big one here, I think we'll spend some time talking about is the drop in topicals, which is down $885,000, almost $1 million in the topicals category. But
That's
the interesting
crazy.
point, it
That's
is, and the
crazy.
interesting point there on the drop in topical sales is that despite that, there has been an increase in the number of topical SKUs. It's up 61 SKUs,
Yeah.
which is strange because that's definitely a tough category. As we talked to Shauna and
Well, and
Shauna
I've got something. It's a perfect segue, and I promise you, I did not set this up. So you're talking about topicals. You know that I've been speaking with Wildwood Labs for a while. It's a smaller hemp-based company. They're hemp farmers out of Lakeside, Lakewood. I'm gonna get that wrong. I'll figure it out. But it's Wildwood Labs. Been speaking with Shane over there. Eric is, he oversees the operations and farming. I deal with a ton of joint pain. I was talking with Shane. He's like, we've got our hemp-based product now available. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, because we had talked about distribution and which markets was he going to target. And I said, you know who you need to talk to. And he's like, who? I go, Jay Schwartz. He's like, okay, fill me in. New to the industry. Okay. So, Wildwood Labs are CBD based, full spectrum, hemp derived product. Okay. He's like, okay, I'll talk to him. So anyways, I do have this. I'm gonna be careful with this fucking infuriates me too, by the way. I'm gonna tell you that. So this is Wildwood Labs. It is a hemp stick. This one was the extra strength that Shane sent over. But it's a CBD body balm. I wouldn't be mentioning this. CBD doesn't get me excited half the time. Okay. But you know me, I never ever mention something that I don't like. So full spectrum CBD, 1,500 milligrams per roll up. And I'll make sure that I cover that as well. So it's a nice little roll up. I think it's lavender and sage or something. But anyways, dude, I will buy them. I don't care. I'm going to make sure all of my friends have one of these. When I first got it, it actually came on the Friday. That's why I didn't bother you with anything because you're off. We want to talk about that too.
yeah,
Gallivanting up north. I'm like, okay, cool. Took a picture, sent it to Shane. I'm like, I'm gonna give it a try. I put it on I've got massive tennis elbow pain. Massive. Put it on, and it truly what I would say, oh, it was maybe placebo effect, but I've used it multiple times over the weekend now. It's a fucking miracle product. I'm not gonna say it does or does not do anything. I'm sold. Like sold. Um, put it on my elbows, and then in the weekend I'm putting it on my knees, I'm putting it on my shoulders, I'm putting it on my back.
You
Like
may as well just
seriously,
take a bath in it.
I should. The one thing that some may or may not like, and I'm sorry, Wildwood, I personally love it. It has, and you only know this if you know it. It has a hash oil smell to it after the scents kind
Mm.
of wear off. I'm okay with it. I actually love it. But anyways, it does have that. But personally, it worked for me. It worked for me. It's available on Mendo only at this point in time. They are working on distribution. I was going to talk about it anyways, and then you mentioned the edible category. So this is
Well,
the challenge that we see is in the topical categories, right? Is again, Shauna Levy, Imagine Mercer. We can't say wellness. We're not allowed to say wellness. And dispensaries, they're not focused on wellness. Not overly blatant about it, anyways.
well, on the topicals category, since we're talking about it anyway, and because I was up north this weekend,
Yeah,
I'm gonna do a
fill us
shameless
in.
plug. I'm gonna do a shameless plug as well, just because
Okay,
I
let's
had
do it.
one thing I forgot I brought with me, and I was like, "Oh, got absolutely fucking murdered with mosquitoes," because, it's
I
me,
hate mosquitoes.
murdered like the first or second night. This from when we went to grow up, a little while ago. Let me one second, cover that too. We stopped by the Stewart Farm,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
the Stewart Farm birth.
Yeah, yeah,
These
yeah,
are
yeah.
the
Rebound.
rebounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was their, it's a 1-to-1 balm,
Yeah.
and I was like, "You know what? I got it with me. I forgot it was in my bag of goodies that I brought up." I was like, "Let me just see how this works in these," because normally I'm the guy where I have that mosquito bite, and it doesn't bug me until I know it's there, and then I itch it a little bit, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden, it's a nightmare,
Yeah.
and mine swell up fairly
Oh,
big.
man.
Anyway, pop some of this shit on there, and it's probably not made for that, but I'll tell you
Did
right
Tanner
now,
I think Tanner even mentioned, "Throw it on mosquito bites. We hear it works on mosquito bites." So you did, and it
I
worked?
did, and I didn't notice them. Not only that, the swelling for me personally, again, not
Yeah.
advocating that this is what it does, but for me, I didn't get the typical swelling
Wow.
that I got out of them,
Hmm.
and I just completely didn't notice them
Yeah,
after
and
that.
that Rebound product, it's like 250 milligrams THC to 250 CBD, I think, right?
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
smells amazing
Yeah,
because it's like
lavender?
lavender
Yeah.
and shit. Yeah, yeah.
So the question is, did it help prevent the mosquitoes from landing on you too? Is it
Well, I
did
don't
you
know.
just rub
That's
over
the
your
thing,
entire
right? Like
body?
I didn't notice them after that, so I don't know if
Oh,
that's just I applied enough where the areas that I got bit and that was it, or if that was also a side effect of
or
because of the smell. I just didn't,
because you took your dab break.
I did. I took my
So
dab
maybe
break.
you're just so blasted, you're like, "Ah, come on, mosquitoes, whatever."
I'm a bit of a dab champion now. I'm just saying. No, 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 by no means.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I did. I took the dab break. I took my Apple up from Nugs,
Wow, look at you
and
traveling with all this glass.
yeah, I was trying to educate. I was trying to educate friends who have never done
Nice.
dabs into secretly just wanted to get them blitzed, but that was my form of education.
Wes, why are you taking half the size of us? Oh, don't you worry about that. That's funny. Oh my god. Well, and it's funny because we talked about dabs. You just went right in, you did your research, you bought one, and I'm like, I don't want messes. I don't want to deal with that. And we happen to have a guest coming on that can help solve my conundrum of messy dabbing. And I'm super excited. I'll tell you, doing the research for Drew Henson, founder of TOQI. That's who we have on today, folks. I've never been so worried to not be able to recall a timeline and the amount of accolades and achievements of someone. Uh, like I spent through the week and then last night I like to be fresh with it. Dude, the guy's done so much and he looks like he's in his early 30s, late 20s. Like
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I know what you mean because I have questions too, and you know me, mine are gonna focus. I have a lot of questions specifically about his time doing work with, some NASA engineering,
Yeah.
and I don't wanna, as amazing as that is and that accomplishment is to be able to work for NASA and do that work, you can't sum all of his work in history down into that point as big as it
Yeah.
is, as amazing as it is. He's got this entire other career, right, of
Everything.
designing amazing products and
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just TOQI. So he's going to solve this issue. I've been searching the products. I want him just to verify 100%. Yes, Tom, to get it right from the founder and CEO. That's the one you need to dab with. Because I don't want to make a mistake. I've done this before. I think I need this. I think I need that. You get what you need, and then all of a sudden, I am going to make a suggestion. Maybe is that just provide a beginner's kit. This is what you need. I I don't have all the time in the world to do the research on it, so hopefully he can just make a suggestion and go, "Yeah, this is what you need." But anyways, super excited to have him on.
Yeah,
I'm
'cause
gonna leave feeling dumb probably.
yeah,
Hopefully not.
I'm sick of cleaning this dab rig already. I've used it like a handful of times, and having to remember to use ISO or something to clean that bowl out every. It's just a pain in the ass, and I don't want to do it every time.
Yeah, I can't. There's no way. I'll break it probably during the cleaning. I don't want it sitting around. I just I know the outcome. I'll break it, and it'll become too onerous for me to want to clean it. It'll just end up not getting.
Not to mention, not to mention the potential hazard of touching scorching hot quartz glass.
Oh yeah.
I almost made that mistake up there. I had to move it out of the way as I brewed it, and then almost grabbed, and I was like, "Whoop!"
Oh
That
my
would have been my
god.
hand fucked for the weekend.
Gee,
So
it's just yeah. Hospital probably an hour away. Yeah. Jeez. Oh well. Well, I'm excited to have Drew on. It's been some time in the making trying to get him on. He's super busy and for good reason, which makes sense, right? But it'll be nice to have him on. So anything else that we want to cover? Oh, there's one thing I would like to touch on. Did you catch the post by Harrison Jordan this morning? I say Jordan. I know you know when I say Harrison, but for our audience is Harrison Jordan. We've had him on before. He's a lawyer doing all of the great work within the industry. We joke and say Canada's most hated or Health Canada's most hated lawyer, um, replacing Kirk. But anyways, there's some potential changes. We're gonna have to get Harrison on to walk us through this, but potential changes coming to research licensing, and that could affect your ability to conduct, especially contract-based licensing. So what I understand is there's 3 categories, but category 1 would be, products that and I might get this wrong, but we'll post whatever we can, and we'll get Harrison on to explain this as things are kinda coming about with it. But, category 1 products, I think you have to put the application in with your research license. So when you're applying for a research license, those products would then get listed. These are the products you're allowed to test. In the form of contract-based, so I'm an LP, I want to work with and I don't know if this affects lit, but I'm just using lit research as an opportunity here to explain it. I want to contract lit to conduct some research. I would book time, pick which products I'm going to use, show up, they'll ensure that there's people there, they sign waivers, they come in, they do testing, they provide feedback on your product. Those may go by the wayside now, that opportunity. And I guess you can add new products after you've been licensed, but you have to apply to add these new products. And that could be, I think it's a non-binding minimum 30-day approval process to just add. So let's say I got licensed to conduct research with vapes, this particular product, but now I want to add pre-rolls. I would have to apply to Health Canada to then conduct the research on these. And then I don't even know what to say to this because I get it. Health Canada has one hell of a fucked up job. I get it. But this doesn't help. Like, what are we afraid of? Why are we afraid of this? Like,
yeah, so it's a backward step, is what it feels
it's
like.
completely backwards. And, not only are you not allowed, I get some provinces are rolling it out. You've got some opportunities for cafes and, some progressive movement for farm gate, which doesn't necessarily mean you can consume, but the ability to consume and conduct research was already there. I don't think anyone was abusing it that I'm aware of. And there's not even that many that I'm aware of either that have been issued. So why? My biggest question is just why? Why is this necessary? And maybe Harrison can answer that, but I bet you he's even scratching his head. I have no idea why. So
Yeah, it's strange. It completely kills velocity as well when you're trying to get a new product to market and do that research, right?
yeah, and they're putting limits on how much you're allowed to have per person. You have to be 18 to I don't know, 65. You have to be a regular cannabis consumer at least 3 times a week. You have to have consumed for a minimum of 12 months. Um, it's almost endorsing cannabis use on this side and then restricting it on the other side.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
also seems like it's limiting research at that point. If you're confining it to some of those smaller subsets of groups, right? Like the research
Yeah.
opportunities also seem to disappear.
Well, and one of the things I would like to do, like, let's say I was an LP, I'm bringing an innovative product to market, that would entice, not entice, not induce, but you have fringe consumer interested individuals. I don't know where I was going there with that, but these individuals, you may be innovating a product that they would try. And how do you now get that product? I mean, I get it. There's some processes, but why make it so restrictive, right? Like, if I have to have been a consumer for 12 months minimum, then how am I testing new entrants to market? How am I ensuring that my innovative products that would cater to them are going to be products that would suit them if they have been consuming for 12? Like, I just don't fucking get it, man. It, it's just a step backwards, like you say. It's a step backwards, and it's certainly not the progress we want to see in the industry. How many does it affect? I don't know. But anyone with a research license, we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And we're going to try our best to get Harrison in to see if he can fucking make some sense of it, which God knows. Anyways, excited to get Drew on. Let's take a break. And when we return, we'll have Drew Henson of TOQI and so many other things.
Hey friends, guess what? It's almost t-shirt season. Are you ready? You should be rocking your favorite brand. Head on over to thehighflyer.ca and check out all the licensed cannabis brand swag that we've got available. From Odo to Victoria Cannabis Company, Smoker Farms, Royal Harvest, the list goes on and on. There's more coming on every single week. Check it out, add it to your cart, and be prepped. Sun's out, guns out.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We're joined by Mr. Drew Henson, founder of 22B and TOQI. Drew, we finally did it. You're here.
We did. We beat the odds. Beating the odds is a thing these days.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you could join Legacies and Wes and I to unpack your legacy because, dude, I was joking with Wes earlier in the episode, and I'm like, I pride myself on retaining information for a short period of time, right? And I'm going through all of your accolades, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it all. But, dude, it's such a pleasure to have you on. We really want to understand. We're going to lead up to TOQI, but I want to go way back, which we do with a lot of our guests, to build that story. What is the story behind your legacy? And there's something I want to be sure to touch on, which is how cannabis helped you focus. Because if out of any of our guests that we've had, I think that you help us break that stigma of, oh, all cannabis users are stoners. They don't do anything. They sit around in their basement and play video games all day. And that's not you, man. You may play some video games. I don't know, but you're certainly not that air quote stereotypical stoner that so many like to attach to our industry. So we appreciate you joining.
I appreciate that. And I do game. You know what the funny thing about gaming is that when your brain is kind of moving a lot, and for anybody who kind of has a similar way to think, a lot of people, if you're playing a battle royale like Apex or something, you just shut everything else out. But there's so much stimulation that you're still using everything that it's actually like taking a break. Interesting.
Yeah,
100%.
That's
Absolutely.
I've never really looked at it like that way, but that's true. For me, I have to have something, whether it's a documentary or something, just to disconnect and shut my brain off because it's all day, and it wears on you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So, I mean, geez, where do we start? Let's go back to some early days. So, Calgary, young whippersnapper, and then made your way to Banff, and then eventually over to Saskatchewan to get a Bachelor of Science degree in physics engineering.
Yes, sir.
We'll pause there for a quick second. because the makeup of individuals that want to study that, one, you got to click upstairs. Number two, what the fuck? At what point did you go, yeah, that's what I want to do. I'm going to bring all that calculus into the fold.
Yeah, where my background starts and my desire to be in engineering starts, and all that journey starts from me, is a bit of a continuation, I guess, from a generational thing. My father he's a genius, man. He's one of those guys you never want to play cards again, like ever. He will take you for all you're worth and then laugh at you on your way home. Yeah, he's not there. But yeah, he got one of 2 scholarships to the country of Guyana. And he was able to come to Canada to do mining engineering and to make his way, and, a couple of twists and turns, goes back to school to get his MBA in business. And yeah, I have an older brother that's 10 years older than me. He was born in Guyana. I was actually born in Grand Cache. If you fast forward the story a little bit, my father ends up taking over the coal mining company that he works for because it's going under. He figures out a very genius way to keep the company going by making international sales with the coal supplies that they had. And fast forward 20 years after that, he let go of the company. And I was actually born in the Grand Cache where the coal mine is.
Oh.
And so, at a very young age, I guess I demonstrated some aptitude for mathematics. I'm bilingual. I speak French as well. And
Okay.
so in grade 3, there's a game that I remember distinctly playing called Tour du Monde, which is like Duck, Duck, Goose, but it's math equations.
Okay.
And so they stopped me from being allowed to play because I got to lap the class too many times. So like from then forward, it was just like, I don't know, almost known that I would have been in engineering. And it kind of actually contributed to a bit of my downfall because coming out of high school, I was one of those just bratty kids. I knew I was going to be in engineering. It wasn't really a choice at that point in time. I've been working my jobs, but I had support from my family, to be honest. And those 2 things don't really drive home you wanting to do something for yourself. And once you kind of get to that level of academia, you're not passing if you don't want to be there,
Right.
And so in my first year of university, I got under 60, I got over 50. So they were like, you got to leave engineering, but you can stay in our school. And I was like, well, I don't really want to leave engineering, so I'm actually just going to leave your school. Sure. And that's kind of when I figured out for myself that's what I wanted to do. And originally, it was going to be mechanical engineering is what I wanted to do because I have a very big interest in cars. And it wasn't actually until I was forced to rejoin engineering that I upped the ante and decided to go into engineering physics after getting called out by my dad for being a bum. And long story short, said, okay, well, I'll just see what it is I can't do in this world, and he knew what words to push to motivate me, I guess we could say. He just said, if you
Okay.
think you're so smart and you think you're so great, which at the time I did, and if I'm honest, I kind of still do. If you think you're so great and so smart, like, why don't you just try one, And I was like, okay, well, let's go into engineering physics because at the time, instead of being on the mechanical side, I had a very big Formula One passion, a motorsports passion. And so I committed myself to being on a path to design Formula One racing technology.
Mhm.
And engineering physics is a combination of other disciplines of computer science, of actual physics, of theoretical optics. So you get a lot of electromagnetic wave theory, how those things work. So you get a lot of how systems work, how electronics work, how computer science works. But you also get a strong basis in, standard materials and sciences. So you can just kind of understand how things fit together.
Wow.
And that's where I kicked off. That's where the
That's where
journey.
you started.
You
That's where we started. And then so at what point, because I want to talk about, your work with NASA and F1 and the competition that kind of put you, I would say, in the limelight, at least when it came to design, especially. But so you completed your bachelor's degree. Was it during that time? Because we're not done. Now you get a master's in product design. Is that correct? From Italy. How did that come about? Was it like, okay, I'm done here. Next, I'm going to Italy, or
No,
was there
it
a
was.
competition? Like, how did that come about?
So I was after university, I immediately moved to Indianapolis,
Okay.
where
Oh
I did
yeah.
my internship with a company called Walker Racing. They had some cars in the Indy Series at the time, as well as the Atlantic Championship. Nigel Mansell's kids actually drove for us that year.
Okay.
Nice family, side note. So when I was in Indianapolis, I was, learning to do a lot of things with the race team, getting to do some really cool experiences. I was actually traveling with the team and learning how to do the data acquisition engineer intern. So setting up the cars, pulling the data off the cars, getting them ready, getting their suspensions ready, just working with the team, pulling data live during the races. I mean, and then all the BITCH work that comes along with being an intern. I'm going to rephrase that. That comes along with being an intern in my era. These eras.
Okay. Yeah.
So then the recession hit. So now we're talking 2008, just dated myself. And I went back to Calgary because my brother had started a nightclub.
Oh.
And so I was off the team. I went back to Calgary. I figured I could help out with the family business. After about a year of suits, ties, bottle service, just things that weren't really in my alleyway of happiness.
That doesn't seem like it scratches your itch, man.
I decided to go back to school. And that's when I had actually tried to become a car designer at first. Because remember, at this point in time, I'm not a designer. I'm just strictly an engineer doing engineering.
Yep.
And so when I decided to go back to school, I was thinking maybe I would love to do car design. So I applied to Scuola Politecnica di Design in Italy. I made a portfolio of sketches. They promptly called me instead of sending and they were just like, hey, we're just going to stop your application here. You can't draw for shit. And they literally said that. They're like, if you want to be any other designer, they're like, what is it you want to do? Because like to be a car designer, you need a natural ability to draw.
Okay.
And that because the techniques involved, the speed at which car designers communicate with each other and the level of precision for the surfacing required, you just have to have a really good, strong ability to visualize that and communicate it. So it turns out that me putting a piece of paper over my computer monitor and trying to copy some cars wasn't good enough. So after having a conversation with them, they realized that, I had this technical ability to create things, but I had no ability to put that creation or system into a tangible product.
Okay.
And so upon that realization, they did invite me to their industrial design program based upon my engineering background and my willingness to put in the effort to learn to draw. So that's how that started. And then while I was in Milan doing my industrial design masters that Formula One held a worldwide competition in partnership with AEA Engineering and Renault's F1 team. And the mandate was design the most innovative advancement you could think of for their F1 car at the time. And it could be across a multitude of facets, whether it's material composition, engineering, mapping, aerodynamics, chemical compositions of fuel, anything that you could think of, they were going to accept. They had a category.
Yeah.
So, the next part of the story should probably piece in the legacy question you asked me about cannabis coming into my life.
Yeah.
Probably wrangle that into this equation.
Okay.
Ever since young, just that wild child. There was a button on the escalator, I'm pushing it. There was a speaker, I'm yelling into it. There's a puddle, I'm splashing in it. God bless my mother and her patient. She did a great job with a crazy child. And it wasn't really in our culture to think about ADD, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not really in our culture at the time to think about ADHD, let alone have your kid be diagnosed, and then definitely not telling people about that. That's that's a faith thing, So I'm Guyanese, but the most I am of any blood type is Chinese, actually. And my mom looks like a little Chinese lady. My dad looked like Samuel Jackson. And so once, at the young age, which we will not discuss publicly, but we'll say it was definitely a young age.
Formidable years. We'll say formidable.
Yeah. I had that full blown Dave Chappelle moment where I know some people don't get feelings the first time they consume, but I was with my Abba Zaba on cloud 9, just laughing the whole way home. But when I woke up, I still had some, and me and my friends at the time, went and pop can or whatever it was. I'm pretty sure it was actually a grape C+ pop can. And it was just the ability to focus on stuff was just different. It was wild. It wasn't really right at the beginning. I learned how to responsibly prescribe a self-dose. I think where a lot of people get it wrong is you can't abuse it. One puff too many for too many people takes you out of the realm from maybe being able to do work to doing work.
Right.
And, most people are somewhere else on that spectrum. But I think it also comes from a tolerance perspective. The more you use anything as medication, the more it becomes something that you're able to adapt with and utilize versus just be crippled by and, a side effect of. So by the time I was in high school, I walked to school every day. I would blaze on my way to school, and my first class was calculus, I remember, in my last year, and I would just sit, bang it out in French, and then be off for the rest of my day. If it wasn't like that, I was easily the most disruptive person in class, easily maybe not there, easily just like, I don't know, And that kind of continued for me into being in university, into now being in Italy. And side note, in Italy, it was exceptionally difficult for me to find quality cannabis.
I was just going to ask, like, highly frowned upon in Italy at the time, I would imagine.
Yes, absolutely. I like to bless a lot of people. God bless the guy who owned the little sandwich shop down the street, because he became my friend, and all his friends became my friends, and they kind of helped me out. It was, if I was looking for something, I'd probably 80% of the time be getting hash, just because it was much easier to procure there. So ended up learning a whole bunch of different ways to consume hash. And now bringing this story forward, when I had to think about what it is I was going to make, I really had no clue. And
this is for the competition.
This is for the competition now. Yeah. And so, typical style, I'm in my kitchen, smoked a bowl of hash, and I just remember thinking to myself, like, how am I going to get this project to move? And there was something about the word movement that I just kind of locked in on. And what I ended up making or designing was a way to move all the excess ballast weight of a Formula One car dynamically around the car throughout a race.
Okay.
So that you could effectively change the weight distribution profile of an F1 car on the fly. There's about 200 kilograms of just dead weight that they put in these cars in various locations, depending on the track, more straightaways, more corners, more turns, more G-forces. Over the course of a race, you lose 100 kilograms of fuel. So the driver has to respond to stop the car from oversteering or understeering, but the crazier the dynamics get, the harder that job becomes. So you can imagine now a car that's always perfectly balanced, or you can also imagine a car that you throw into a corner and it literally throws counterweight the other way so that you could hug it faster.
Wow.
And it was super slick. It was done with magnetic fluids and solenoids in a pretty advanced design. And I remember when the head of Renault's F1 division, or innovation division, was like, "How'd you come up with this?" I was like, "Oh, I was in my kitchen." And I always remembered this because I thought it was weird. I had to say having a beer. And then I thought, well, maybe now this guy just thinks I'm an alcoholic, but somehow that's a better conversation to be having,
Yeah.
And so I just remember that being a thing. So I remember that being a thing.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want, especially during a competition. Well, I was in my kitchen and I smoked a bowl of hash, and click.
Because the competition was also just beyond your presentation. We spent a couple of days with them. We went for dinner. It was one of those things where it was like all encompassing everything you say to these people, because the winners got a job with them.
Oh, wow.
And so there was some pretty big stakes on the table.
So now you won the North American competition side of it, though, correct?
Correct. So I came first in all of North America, so Canada, US, Mexico. And then they flew me to England, to their headquarters, to defend against 10 others from around the world. And that was the day I learned to lose. I actually thought I won. Pretty confident I can say I came top 5, top 4 probably. And but another thing I learned in my life is good thing, bad thing, who knows? And that statement holds so true. Like, the older you get, the more something shitty's happened, where enough time's gone on that you're like, oh, I'm so happy that happened that way.
And it takes a certain maturity to be able to understand that. Myself going through it as well. I'm approaching 50 and I'm like, holy smokes, thinking back, like, it sucks some of it happened, but I've learned and grown from it, but I can use that as experience to influence the direction my children go as well. So quick question on that then. What won? What beat that? Because I'm not as big a fan, obviously, as you could be. I mean, you wanted the design in F1. I think Drive to Survive put me onto F1, which I'm sure it did a lot of people. I was interested in it before that, but then I became a big fan. Was it DRS system? Like what became number one to trump? I mean, because that sounds pretty wild, like your
Yeah.
design, like, because you're
Yeah,
right,
it was
you're
pretty
losing
slick.
100 kilos of fuel and like, it's crazy.
So 2 projects won. There was 2 winners. One of them was DRS related. So
It
for any
was,
of you
okay.
who don't know, DRS means drag reduction system, and it allows a car to drop the back fin on a straightaway, which would reduce drag. So you gain about 15 kilometers an hour as you jet down it. It was a technique that I forget which team started. It might have been Mercedes, but what the engineers figured out, and this is why I love Formula One, because they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to make the craziest ideas come alive just for a little bit of time, because then it's going to become illegal.
Yeah.
But in this case, one of their engineers figured out that if they rerouted the exhaust gases so that instead of coming out the tailpipe, they could just use a little shifter, the exhaust gas would then reroute and push up, and it
Oh.
would push the airstream that was going to hit the rear wing and push it up and over. So the combined was less drag.
Wow.
What the winning project figured out was a way to make a 2-tiered wing so that at certain speeds, the bottom half would dull the top half. And it was just an efficient way to do it without having to have a mechanical solution.
Got it. Okay.
So
Interesting.
I'm interesting. On the Formula One stuff, Drew, you see today in today's races, especially over, I think, the last 5-10 years or so, there's been a lot of complaints, I think, from fans, but also those in Formula One itself, about it not being as exciting as it could be, because you still have those pack runners at the front who are leagues and leagues ahead, and then you have the people behind. The budgets are obviously a thing as well, but in your mind, from an engineering perspective, what would you change from a like the regulations of the rules, or even the car designs themselves, to make F1 more exciting from an audience perspective for you watching those races?
So not expecting this question. So what I think, to your point, is, so here's the thing. What's interesting about Indy versus F1, as kind of the basis for my answer, I guess, is that Indy people say it's all about the drive, and that's because the cars are a lot more similar. You can always change a couple of things, whereas to your point, when you can change everything, you end up with this big discrepancy between the teams. And they were supposed to try and curb that with a cost cap, which Red Bull blew over anyway, so it didn't really make that happen. And then they talk about, well, if we can just make the cars follow closer, if we could do X, Y, and Z. I think there's a certain amount of just cost cap enforcement and just making sure that certain teams can't go crazy. I think just the discrepancies in the budget just maybe need to be rethought a little bit to give the smaller teams a better chance. And whatever they're doing currently isn't really cutting it. I think from a technological perspective, they've been almost everywhere. They had the cars going so powerful that the drivers were blacking out, and that's why they had to pull them back. So it's not that the cars can't be faster or can't hit the turns farther. It's just that they realized that was a dangerous thing to do.
Right.
But I do think one thing, though, and that is keep the engines gas related. Not a big fan of Formula E, and not necessarily just because of that they don't sound loud. There's just something to the racing that doesn't seem as competitive. And I think that's the draw of Formula One, is it's really the pinnacle of technology. And so, look, a team's going to win for 3-4 years straight. Sure. But when those switch up happens, it's exciting. And I think if you're an F1 fan, I would say have your front pack driver that you love, but then also find a mid pack driver that you support.
Yeah.
And then it keeps the races exciting. Like, I love Daniel Ricciardo, and watching him struggle to be amazing again has been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah,
Well-
agreed.
So on that, what is your favorite race team right now? Is it Renault because of the love and, well, I mean, the North American love?
Good question. My favorite team right now is actually Ferrari.
Okay. Why is that?
I supported Lewis, obviously, and I have a lot of respect for Red Bull, very specifically not because of Max or Christian Horner, but because of Adrian Newey. So, for the viewers, Red Bull currently, until the end of the season, have the best car designer in Formula One who's responsible for so many amazing pieces of machinery. And so, watching somebody like that's career is entertaining. But with Ferrari, they have such heritage and such history. And I think their signing of Lewis Hamilton is so different from what I expected that I have to give it respect. And they were struggling for a while, same as a couple other teams that had to bring it back, like McLaren, for example, and you got Zach Brown to bring them back. But I think Ferrari next year, in the next couple of years, is going to be exciting. And I also just, I'll say it, it's nice to see Ferrari diversifying their team. So
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Well, and I mean, that's the thing, like, we won't stay on F1, but I think that Lewis Hamilton did so much for the sport, right?
Yeah.
But we saw certain animosity starting to come up and rise up over time. And I mean, it's tough. You're always on top, always on top. You have a target on your back. But the work that he's done outside the industry has just been incredible. And I don't know if I've seen that in any other sport where you've got this standout individual that is shouting from the rooftops, right? So love that. But let's go on, because man, we might be here 5 hours. I don't know, but let's see. So you go through the Renault competition. You place in top 10, obviously. You're in England, you're presenting it. At what point, so putting that on a resume, I don't know, you aren't the type that needs to really create a resume, not anymore. But back then, where did you go from there? Like, what was the next steps?
Well, thankfully, I think that competition was what finally did get me a job, but I had to suffer a good 6-7 months of just that insanity of trying to find that right combination on Google that's going to find me that new job that I can apply to that I haven't applied to. When I left design school, so the other thing that you won when you won that competition is you won the internship position. And in order to graduate from school, you had to serve an internship.
Okay.
So they had agreed that would have serviced that. Because I didn't win, I had to go find a mentor. And I found, I guess he found me. Alberto Fraser, an Italian Scottish designer. He's at a ripe age these days, but most beautifully articulate swearing, has his own little espresso machine. He's like, I'm going to teach you 3 things. 1, how to draw. You can't draw for shit. 2, how to think like a designer and not an engineer, because they're fundamentally different. And 3, quality of life. And he was just really trying to stress, like, what's important to you? I left being head designer at Ray-Ban because I wanted to be around my daughter.
Yeah.
And for me, I wanted to be in a city. After having experienced Indianapolis, after having experience being, on track with some F1 teams and more progress there, I knew I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in Milton Keynes, UK, driving 2 hours to get a Chinese restaurant. That's not for me. I really value culture, diversity, but more than that, I just value being able to go do stuff.
Yeah.
It's important to me. So I decided not to try to get a position with a race team and moved to London, England, where I just decided to dedicate myself to consumer electronics, technology design. I figured that was really what was driving the passion. And I gave my resume to every single design house. Nobody called me back. Applied to, I don't even know how many hundreds of jobs. Nobody called me back.
And why is that, though? Like, I'm very curious. Like, when you see your accolades, even thus far up until this point, they're not using software to screen
I was trying to be a junior
resumes.
designer.
Okay.
And so my engineering accolades didn't really matter to these people.
Got it. Okay.
And
Because I was going to ask that question next. I'm going to ask about that. Design versus engineering, because I know they clash. That's got to be tough. So sorry, let's continue on. Yeah.
So wait, where was I there?
No, I was just asking, like, why, all these applications and right.
So, you don't know what you don't know. And this is a story of that. And London's so competitive, even till this day, getting a design internship in London is crazy. There's one of the differences, and the reason why I wanted to go to Europe to do industrial design versus doing it in somewhere like Canada is it's ingrained in the culture. In Italy, it's ingrained in the culture. In London, it's ingrained in the culture. In Canada, not really ingrained in the culture. And the support for that really comes down to looking at the museums that exist, looking at the programs that exist, looking at where it is somebody could draw inspiration from, And so while I had some pretty cool school project One of them, I designed hot cube. So instead of ice cubes, it was like you could use a little heat tray and they could just drop some cubes in. They would heat up your stuff without having to microwave. It was still my school projects,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And so
Yeah.
something I've learned, plus what I did with my internship, but still, there were some kids that did some amazing stuff coming out of school, you know? And every time I got a no, I just had to kind of take a look at my portfolio and really assess, am I actually selling the story that I think I am? And what I realized was there was a large gap to tell a better story that I'm a technology designer. So instead of just relying on my school project, I really started to think about what it is from a brand perspective that I understood, something that I inherently, since I was a kid, and my father loves Bang& Olufsen. He's loved Bang & Olufsen since we were, from the little age. He's a big audiophile.
Yeah.
And so I really felt like I could design speakers for Bang & Olufsen. So I just went to work designing mock product, and that was, I think, what started the conversation versus what wasn't starting the conversation for me.
Okay.
And then to your point, in 1 week, I got a couple offers from a couple different places. Dyson were looking for a designer at the time. Burgo Pack, which is a pharmaceutical packaging company, and Drift Innovation,
Oh,
making
okay.
action cameras.
Yeah.
And so, 3-4 interviews later, I'll always remember this question. The second founder looks at me and he goes, "Let me get this straight. You've never put a product to market. Why would I hire you?" And I was like, "Because you make action cameras. You're not going to find anybody else who makes action cameras. It's a new category. But I
Yeah.
guarantee you I'll solve any problem you have faster than anybody else you put in front of me." And he was like, "I can work with that. Sounds great." And I take that lesson all the way forward to today. When I do my own hiring, it's so important to me for the juniors that come on board that you can demonstrate this is something you're passionate about.
Right.
I want to see you have technical aptitude, and that's what I can discover from your school project. But unless you're showing me you've created something because you just love it, like
Yeah.
that's your jam, like that's what I'm about. So you better be about that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. You're
you're
not
not
hiring
doing
just to
the
fill
job.
seats. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Wow. So you ended up at Drift then,
Yeah.
and which brings us to the next one. This is where Wes is going to geek out, I'm sure. So you work with Drift. What is it? The Ghost S, is that correct? Is the action camera, and then you obviously took that work and not persuaded, but worked with NASA to clear these cameras for use on the International Space Station. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
This is gonna sound really pretentious, but technically it was them persuading me.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
All right.
'Cause
There we
they
go.
they
you
bought
don't
them
think
off the
that
shelf.
NASA-
Yeah, they what had transpired is one day we just got a phone call to the company, and somebody claiming to be from NASA because they just loved our product.
Okay.
And it was at the time when our tech was very competitive and everybody was using a lot of similar parts. So trying to get an edge on another company, I always tell my bosses, we don't have $100 million budgets like GoPro, but we were able to stay third in the world for a while from an action camera perspective. When Sony came in, Toshiba came in and stole my designs, by the way,
Wow.
is because you can out-design them. And this is a
Mm.
fundamental question that a lot of people get wrong sometimes, is that a big box company, Sony, Toshiba, whoever, when they enter a new product category, they're not necessarily putting their A team on that product category, right? And so when you put a B, C, or D team, they have to go through the same paces of learning the same lessons as everybody else.
Yeah.
And so if you're 3 years behind using a C, D team, it doesn't matter that you're Sony. Yes, you have more resources. Yes, you have everything. But it just takes time to figure out some questions, unfortunately.
Right.
So we were able to do some things right. And I was able to, when I came out with the company, I learned a lot from the head of engineering from our Chinese manufacturer. So I was spending about 8 to 10 trips a year in China.
Oh.
I spent about a year of my life out of the last decade in China, but in like 2 to 3 week trips. So figure
Yeah.
that out. And I had the knowledge of how to do it, but he really polished you need to fix this little thing so we can manufacture, or this little thing here. So, it was really me being a design intern. I started at Drift as their junior designer, and then I was quickly the senior designer because there was no technical other person in the company. And then I was the director of product, where I got to bring in a couple other people under me for design and engineering, but it was always me and like 2 other people just trying to take on these Goliaths, and
Wow.
we got a lot of incredible work done. I think we put about 6 primary cameras to market, another dozen or half dozen or a dozen or 2 dozen accessories. 41 countries we sold in, and we had a pro team at the time. So when we were making new cameras and new designs, we got to meet up with the Quicksilver guys and go surfing in Vidal to make sure that the waters worked, or we got to link up with some drivers. I actually ended up putting my cars back on F1 cars. We got a phone call one year to do some marketing support for them.
Oh, wow.
And so one of the cameras that I designed, the Drift Ghost S, it was one of the first cameras that had a built-in screen.
Oh, okay.
And that was really what set our company apart. And the reason they were able to excel was they had data they used properly.
Right.
And so the 2 owners of the company started bringing or making action cameras like when GoPro was still a still camera, and I don't know if everybody knows that, but GoPro 1 is a still camera that you put on your wrist and you went surfing with. And then there's a couple of different stories about how Nick grew that company, Nick Woodman. But the important part is that when they started, they were buying, so these guys are in the UK and London. So they were buying an Oregon Scientific, which made the first action camera way back in the day. That was all the parts put together. They're buying it for like, let's say $100 US and selling it for 300 pounds at a time when
Wow.
the pound was 3 to 1.
Wow.
So they just and how they ended up becoming so successful, they did a lot of right things, but they also did a lot of lucky things. And one of the lucky things they did was they called their domain actioncameras.co.uk before Action Cameras was the name of the segment,
Wow.
the market segment.
Yeah.
So they instantly just secured every SEO. And then they replicated that from, the UK to France to Germany to South Africa to the whole
Yeah.
model. And they became the biggest distributors that side of the world.
Wow.
for action
Cornering the domain market, certainly putting it
Yeah.
on the map. Yeah. Wow.
Well, the lesson though is they took a minute and then they looked at the data, and the data said nobody has a built-in screen, a remote control, and a lens that rotates. So if they could get these 3 features in a camera, they felt like they could have a product.
Yeah.
They found some designer to draw this brick for them. They took it to China. They needed to sell 2,000. They sold 20,000 that year, and that's how they started.
Wow.
But that's also why they had no technical people in the company.
Yeah. Makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. So eventually, so NASA calls Drift.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were they like? What were they? They're just like, hey, we gotta get some cameras up here and start
Yeah.
recording spacewalks. Like, what were they all of a sudden, interested in this action camera category for?
It was a cost benefit analysis for
Oh,
them, right?
okay. Yeah.
Because the technology was flourishing at the time where these small cameras were emerging, and they were supposed to be rugged for these rugged terrain. So they wanted to find out exactly how rugged,
Yeah.
and could it be that instead of having to spend $10,000 on camera Y, which is their usual contracts, could they buy one for a couple $100,
Right. Right.
And I think the reason why they preferred our design at the time was our design was all built in. So like you could just take it as it was. It was waterproof as it was. The screen was already there. The GoPro is required to go into a case, go into these other things. And so at the time, it just made a lot of sense. The rotating lens helped out, so they got in touch. I actually hung up the phone on them the first time because I didn't believe them. I thought it was somebody just messing with me.
Someone pranking you?
Yeah. And so they called back. They're like, yo, don't hang up again because we're not calling back a third time. I was
Wow.
like, hey, sorry. I remember that clear as day. But after talking to them, they just really wanted to study the feasibility. So the first couple of months were just, they had already used the cameras and tested the cameras, so they knew it could do what they wanted to do. At that point in time, it was, can these survive without killing astronauts?
Yeah.
So like, let's go over all the certifications you have. Let's test this thing for electromagnetic radiation leakage. If I drop it and the glass breaks, is this the right type of glass so that the glass particulates aren't going to damage anything as they spread throughout the shit?
Yeah.
All sorts of things like that needed to be tested effectively. How are the batteries contained? If the batteries catch fire, what's going to happen? So worked with them for about 7-8 months. I built them custom firmware. You boot up the cameras, it says NASA on it. And they tried to deploy sticks to the space station. Unfortunately, the first unmanned attempt exploded,
Yeah.
which is a very anticlimactic moment in my life.
I bet. Jeez.
And then, but they got great insurance. So they bought some more and sent them up on the next payload. And then it was about 6-7 years later when Elon Musk docked the Dragon capsule like a year ago or 2 years ago. where I was just watching the feed, and you could see that the astronauts in the space station were still wearing our cameras on the headgear. And
Really?
so
Wow.
they were still using them, still worked. So I was like, oh shit,
That's
that's
wild.
a good testament
I
for
never would have
quality.
thought you're going through all of that, but you're right. Like, if it breaks, if the lens breaks, what's going to happen to the shards of glass? Is it going to pierce suits? Is it going to, right? I would
No,
have never thought. Obviously, there's a lot of safety protocol and measures that they put in place to test, but you don't put, as an outward person, I don't put that thought into it.
right.
So Drew, when they called and obviously they hung up, you hung up the first time and they called back. When you finished that kind of second call and you realized, yes, this was NASA, was there kind of an initial, I don't want to say like a fanboy moment for you where you kind of went, holy shit, like this is NASA, this is, or
Yeah,
was it more so like,
it was
you're
fear.
with your accolades at that point, was it, this is just another customer kind of thing? I'm interested to
No, at
know.
that point it was fear because of how I was thrown into the position and how fast I advanced. I always have the utmost confidence in my abilities, but I was starting to learn I didn't know things, you know?
Right.
And now I was going to be put up against NASA engineers and also like responsible for astronaut lives. So, at that point in time, it was really, oh, all right, well, here's the test. So, um, but we ended up getting through it. And, after you do that and you deliver for your bosses and then you got your gear going up to space because you're the only interface with NASA, your bosses can't really say shit to you.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, just shout out Robin and Sav, the two founders of Drift at the time. I always say to people, even okay, so let me preface this story. When the only time I ever got into an argument with Alberto Fraser, during my internship was I was being bratty about something. I can't remember what it was, but he was trying to explain something to me, and we got into a little tussle. But he looked at me and he goes, "Do you know what your problem is?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know exactly what my problem is. My problem is I think I'm so smart, it makes it hard for me to have a boss." And so he goes, and this is what I'll always remember because he actually said something that was surprising to me because I thought he was just going to be like, yeah, so smart enough. But what he actually said was, first off, it's insane that you know that about yourself. And second off, you know, it's not that it's wrong to feel like you're right or that it's wrong to have the utmost confidence in yourself. You just need to be conscious that nobody's right 100% of the time. And you need to accept it. And the day that you are wrong, if you behave like that, is going to be tenfold worse than if you had just shut the up,
Wow.
And so he was like, so you have two choices. You got to work 10 times harder to never be wrong, or just sit in the background, play the game you want, And from that moment on, I was just kind of like, well, back to that argument with my father, it was like, what is it? Not to say that there's things I can't do. I suck at writing essays. I suck at a lot of things. I suck at surfing. But when it comes to creating technology, I think after doing it several different times and seeing how I approach it and the things that I create, I actually learned that I'm an artist and technology is my art, and whether it's software, hardware, how I created the solutions that come about, the way they interface with humans, they're just a little bit different than the other solutions on the market. And I think that's the part for me where I find a lot of joy in just problem solving and even just the small little things that people discover that. Like, this is one that, shout out Jessica, my chief revenue officer, she's amazing. But like when I designed this, if you actually look over there, there's some like ninja stars in the wall, but the button is at the exact center so that it just feels nice in your hand.
Oh,
And
cool.
those are things that nobody's ever going to know, but like, I don't know, I know. Oh,
Well, now everyone watching knows as well. Like, it's those things. But and that's kind of draws me back to the question that I wanted to ask about. I've worked with engineers and fabricators, and I realize that they're different, but in the same case, you're dealing with design and engineering, and in a lot of cases that clashes because designers want something a certain way, and engineers go, "Are you out of your fucking mind? We can't do it that way. Sorry, you need to change your design. That's just not going to work." And in a lot of cases, engineering will trump design. But in your case, you're schooled in both. You've practiced both. Is that why you own your own company? Because you're
Sure.
like, I'm not going to have anyone telling me I can or cannot do something a certain way. But what is that struggle being as you being, working with different companies and forming your own companies?
so a double-edged sword. In one regard, the lesson is that when you approach something from a design perspective, you want to stay as blue sky thinking as you can, because you don't want to walk into a situation and remove possibilities through your own biases.
Okay.
And so if I'm thinking this isn't going to work this way, it prevents my brain from exploring further thoughts down that avenue, when maybe that didn't work, but I had to get to here to see how that could work.
Mm.
Right. And so it's when you're thinking about it from an engineering perspective, this is, I guess, the root of the argument is, it's like, well, can't we figure out a way to get here? And it's just, it needs to work. Right. And that's the
Yeah.
difference between design and art, is that there's a functionality, there's a promise to a person that this is going to deliver an experience in a certain way, and it's going to solve a problem for you.
Right.
That is the promise of being a designer. The promise of being an engineer is this is going to deliver the solution for you, and it's not going to kill you.
Mm.
And those things are kind of at war for each other, of figuring out how to make something work, because the designer doesn't necessarily want it to be that way, because that to them means it doesn't function. But to
Right.
the engineer, it still functions so long as it works. And that's where the arguments come. And the reason it's a double-edged sword for somebody like me is because I have so few checks and boundaries after my decision making. Well, now there's a lot more because of better processes and more trust leading on my team.
Yeah.
But like when I was at Drift, there was nobody to check an error. If I made a mistake, there was going to be a costly mistake. There was
Yeah.
going to be about 20,000 units produced, and then we'd have to deal with that. So I'd say, in one regard, now that I'm much more experienced, and I've seen a lot of pitfalls, it's less of a sharp sword on the diligence side. But it's still definitely something I'm cognizant of. But as I was coming up, it allows me to move faster, because I have the conversations in my head.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, if I change this little piece of metal, now the conductivity of this metal is going to change, which means it might trip this sensor, which means I can no longer use this piece over here, which means that my designer is going to be mad at me because she just spent 2 hours working on that.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to stop her from working the 20 hours because
Right.
I just saw that whole chain of events on full, So
But isn't that where the beauty comes from, though, is when because you can see it, and it's all around us, right? There are other beautiful products we use on a daily basis, but that is the outcome of when that meshes so well. You've got a beautiful design and an engineer that was willing to commit to, yeah, we'll figure this out. We're going to do it. It's going to maybe more R&D, maybe more money, whatever it takes. But those are the most beautiful of all products that we use day in, day out. So I love that, but I could just imagine the battle and the conversations in your head.
yeah. And, I think back to getting to learn from our Chinese manufacturer and just basically having their entire engineering department at my disposal, I learned a lot from them because they checked my design, right? And so they were able to put guardrails on my work, even though there wasn't really anybody internally to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, I mean, you've won Red Dot Awards. Is it called awards? Red Dots, or are they just Red Dots?
Red Dot Award.
Red Dot Design Awards.
Yeah.
You've a Clio Cannabis Award as well for some of the work that you've done with TOQI, and what was it? Aurora was involved at that time, but it was what was the
Yeah, with our TOQI Fellowship for Cannabis Amnesty.
right Cannabis Amnesty. Sorry, that's what I was thinking. Last Prisoner Project for a second, and I knew it wasn't that one.
Great people
So-
also.
Yes, yeah. But mentor with Black House as well. I don't know where you find all the time. That's got to be difficult. But lead us into anyone can just Google Drew Henson, TOQI, and this is what they're going to get based on interviews, and eventually it'll be this, and our transcripts available. But at what point did you go, you know what, my experience with cannabis needs to change, and it needs to change for so many individuals. I'm going to, don't get mad at me for saying this, but I'm going to create a better mousetrap, because 510 thread cartridges, they're out there, and I think they were out there even when you started TOQI, but wireless is obviously important, right? So that was part of the innovation that you had brought, not that you invented wireless technologies, but you brought it to this category. But what was going on where you're like, And I'm going to tell you why I'm asking this question, but it's like, I got to change this. This is not the experience that individuals should be having with cannabis. What was that eureka moment, or that moment where you're like, I'm going all in on this. I have to do this.
So I also want to preface like some things with, I guess, my failures, because they can't just all be successes and awards, right? Because those things really prime, I guess, the answer to the question you're asking now. And failure is a weird word, it's like, I don't call something a failure, but to not be able to see far enough into the future to know good thing, bad thing, who knows, it just seems like a waste of energy. You're just kind of getting yourself down when you have no ability to actually appreciate if that wasn't right or wrong. And when I left Drift, I started my own studio, 22B, where we make products at the center of art, design, and technology. We had some lifestyle product, and one of the first things we made was a personal safety platform. So we actually, before TOQI, I started in a tech startup called Steam Technic, where instead of Find My Friends, where it's like red flag goes up and I'm over here in danger, it's I'm over here and here's the context of what's happening. So you have the ability to decide if you need to help or what to do, And we wanted to make, whether it's a person with dementia or a kid or a dog, there's all these problems in the world that leverage similar technology, but they're all on different platforms for some reason. So I basically wanted to make a centralized platform, which was the app that we had that you could, use for free. And a lot of Uber drivers used it to record what they saw, what they hear, and where they were, and stream it live to 5 people. But we also made some hardware for that company. And, we were at CES. We had about 8 years ago now, we had it's called the Lotus. Coincidentally, I'm convinced that Kanye not ripped off, but I'll say it was inspired by our design for his stem player. If you actually look at our Lotus by Steam product and the charging case that I put it in.
Yeah, I've seen it. I did look it up. Yeah.
With the stem player and its packaging. But we got it at the Best Buy. We had some talks with some companies about acquisition, but you miss by a little, you miss by a lot. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I saw the writing on the wall. We had about $100,000 left in revenue, to be honest, or not in revenue, but in cash flow. And I said, I put this in this company, we're dead. And so instead of doing that, I decided I'm going to enter the cannabis sector. And what made it feasible was it becoming legal, and not from a stigma perspective, but from a scaling perspective.
Yeah.
It's one thing to create products that are the best in an illicit area, or there's only so many legal networks in the world. But if there isn't like a chance for that to be a global thing, then, you're really limiting your market share that you're diving into.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I had a very strong appreciation for the medicinal impact of cannabis. I took a look at the Canadian market after its first kind of year. So this is 2019 now. So I've been legal in cannabis for about a couple of years. And after the first year, concentrates weren't legal yet, I don't think. I think cards came in later.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, for me, taking the conversation back to my cannabis history and my legacy, I was very fortunate to have 2 brothers who were in Los Angeles for a decade plus. And the reason that's important is because when those original cards came out in Cali,
that's right.
Brother had one.
1996 through 7.
Exactly.
Medical legalization in Cali. That's right.
And so since then, I've been a part of that industry, seeing the products that come through. The original Volcano, when it had the analog dial, I was like, what is this thing? And I loved it. And I still love those things, And at the time, it was G Pen. They had their little micro Gs, which I think they have a plus version of now, but it was that and like butter, batter, and concentrate. And that was really, for me, the beginning experiences of concentrate on the go. And 510 cartridges, I think the other part of this diagram that comes into the equation is they became the DVD of the industry.
Right. Yep.
And so now I'm looking at how to enter an industry. I'm looking at just having a company that didn't do what I wanted it to do. So for me, it was, I'm going to design some products and we're going to see if they sell. If they sell, we'll start a company. And so we actually started the company underneath 22B at first, because I just didn't want all the paperwork. I didn't want all the extra.
Yeah.
Headache. I just wanted to prove that we could have a company that was profitable, and then I think in this industry, there's a lot of people who are really looking to just raise and pump and dump. And I think
Yep.
everybody knows that story, and we could cry about that forever. And we would be in our rights to do so, because it really messed a lot of things up. Because for me, I just missed the green rush of investment.
Yeah.
And I was now on the backside of that when people were jaded about investing in the cannabis industry. Strike one. Strike two, we're making hardware. Hardware is very capital intensive. So investors don't want to invest in hardware because they
Yeah.
don't want their money going into inventory.
Mhm.
Fair enough. Strike three. Strike two. And the third one, it's not really a strike, but from a statistics perspective, if Black people are only getting 1 out of 100 investment sources, well, not to say that that's the reason I couldn't get investment, but it is the reason to say that it got 100 times harder.
Yeah. No
So,
doubt.
you put those three things together, and it just made it very difficult for us. We can't pull capital from BDC. I can't pull capital from any of the major 5 banks. I can't pull capital from any traditional lending source. So you have to get creative. You definitely have to lean on friends and family. And we've gone to hell and high water there to make things work. But I designed 2 products. I designed the TOQI 510, and I designed actually a closed loop product that we never ended up putting on the market, that had 1 gram and 2 gram pod,
Oh.
wireless charging, auto draw. It was pretty slick. But before I went to market, I took a look at, Pax's business model and everybody else's business model. And considering I just told you I had 100 grand in the pocket, I don't have enough money to go get the infrastructure created to suffice a closed loop system where I need people
Yeah.
making in my own pod. And also, I just didn't see the purpose. I didn't see the reasoning, because the 510 card, they were arguably a similar thing, but in a more, generalized delivery system that everybody had.
Mhm.
So what was really just pissing me off was every time I had a 510 battery, if it didn't die on me while I was out, I couldn't charge it with the other chargers because for some reason they look the same, but they don't work the same. Or I'd be smoking something and it would just taste like I was burning plastic. Or I'd be trying something and I'd be getting nothing out of it. Or I'd be trying something and it felt like I was sucking a milkshake through a tiny ass straw. And
Mhm.
just the experience was crap. And so the 510s were an obvious place to start, because I knew I could just, build a superior product. The difficulty about the cannabis industry is building a premium product and having that be supported by the sales channels that are required, right?
Right.
So what
Yeah.
options do I have? I have retail stores. Okay, well, a lot of them are going through price compression, THC
Mhm.
pricing, and they just, they don't want to invest in a lot of premium tech.
Yep.
And so, especially in Canada, it became a difficult thing. And so for us, we've actually refocused our B2B side of our TOQI, and we're focused on California. Got a great new partnership with Navis and Pedal Fast down there,
Cool.
available to all the dispensaries in California now. And we're working through with their teams. Part of our team will be in San Fran next week. So if anybody's around, drop us a line. But
Nice.
from a sheer, if I win one dispensary in the US and I win one dispensary in Canada, the work is arguably the same. But
Right.
that dispensary in the US is going to have 100 more people walking through its doors than every person who walks through the Canadian store,
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so we got put into an interesting situation because the TOQI 510 came out 4.5 years ago, but it's still so good. We never dropped the price on it until I think this year we finally gave a rebate on it,
Mhm.
and pushed it forward. But back to why we create stuff, I thought we could make a 510 that actually delivered a premium experience.
Right.
And the wireless charging was actually a result of trying to figure out how to make it more convenient. How
Right.
do I make this charge more convenient? USB-C plus wireless charging. Okay, well, how
Mhm.
do I get that into the mix? And then the wireless charging became a way for me actually to design a unique footprint that we could get design patented in here. And so to the
Okay.
conversation about engineering versus design, the other thing that people don't really talk about is, yes, when engineering comes back and they say design, you can't do that. They'll shoot down what your current solution is, but it also provides you an opportunity to flip a problem into a unique solution because you're going to spend more time looking at it and dissecting the idea. And so a lot of my win personally actually come from that exchange,
Okay.
of just being pushed there,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
I think that you brought up a really good point when it comes to, so for myself, first experience with a 510, I think it was milkshake through a very thin straw. And I'm like, I can't get into this. Like, it's not working. It's not the experience I want. And for me, I just leave it. I'm now done with it. It's one bad experience and I move on and I'm not even going to come back to it. For Wes and Wes is the dab master all of a sudden, right? So no experience in dabbing, never really, batters, butters, resins, never gone that direction really. And I think it was a couple weeks ago, Wes started, we've been at a number of different trade shows and expos, that sort of thing. And, we were sampled some rosin and we're like, well, we got to give this a try. I think it was a LAN out at Dabble, right? Alana Davis is big into dabs. And she's like, it was this experience when I was at Aurora and this is what it was. And it was so clear. So we set on this path of, well, we got to get into this. We got to figure this out. For myself, I don't want a ton of glassware. It needs to be convenient. It needs not to be messy. It needs to be a good experience. And we start looking around a little bit and I'm like, hold on, I'm an absolute idiot. Drew's coming on and this is the problem that he is going to solve for me. So we do have questions about that. Wes he's a research guy, right? I love him. He's a nerd. He gets right into research. He gets it. So he's all of a sudden, even though he's been told stay away from glass because he breaks it, goes out and gets a dab rig. But the experience is that for me, I'm looking at it going, the point of entry is just too difficult. I've got to figure this out. I got to research. I got to understand how hot does this need to be. I got to get this nail. I've got glassware and I got to take it somewhere if I want to enjoy it. But also my experience with other inferior type products where I just don't want to return to that side. I had utilitarians for dry herb and I've had Stores and Bickles Mighties and all these other ones. And I'm like, they're bulky, they're clunky, they're ugly. I've got to clean them like this. The cleaning process is a pain in the ass. And then you discover the beautifulness of TOQI and trying to understand, well, what is different? And I don't like comparing products to other products. I really hate that. Cars sometimes, I'll do that. But when it comes to uniqueness and innovativeness of a product, I don't want to say, is TOQI like this product? Because it really stands out on its own. And why is that? Why is it because of the mind of Drew? Is it because you were pushing yourself? Others were pushing you? What was it that you ultimately landed on this design that seems to be well received, especially in the US? Canadians, you need to pay more attention and support TOQI. It's a Canadian company. Like, come on. That's number one. But what was it that you're like, I'm going to stick with this design. This is it. It's working. It's solving a major issue. Because that's the way I look at it now is new entrants, especially into, let's say, a dab category.
Yeah.
They're like me, some of them, right? They don't want to deal with all this glassware. They don't want to research it. They don't want to get nails. They don't want propane torches.
Mhm.
Is that where it's coming from? Where is it stemming from?
So there was a couple of things that contributed to it. When we first came out of the gates, we actually didn't have the dab adapter. The dab cartridge wasn't part of the original package, and I think that's also probably indicative of just concentrates not being a really big thing in Canada. And so when I first designed the 510, I was really coming at it from the perspective of how do I make the most advanced powertrain for this product? Charge faster, charge less, charge wireless. That was the mandate. But the lesson here is that that's not what ended up selling TOQI properly. So when I designed this battery, there's things that you can't do with a cheap battery because the extra little IC circuit costs $2, $3, so they would never do it.
Okay.
But for me, if I'm designing something that I say is making 2.8 volts or 3.2 or 3.6, I want to guarantee that. And the only way you can guarantee that is if the device itself is checking its own output and policing itself.
Okay.
And so we actually introduced a closed loop system that is now on, anything else that's considered even close to premium. We know our battery's delivering that experience because it knows, and it's actually adjusting itself micro here and there to make sure that that's what's happening.
Wow.
And the side effect of doing that, which we didn't appreciate for a couple of years, was that anybody who had a live resin or a rosin cartridge, which had a little bit more viscosity, a little bit more flavor requirement, our battery became the de facto tool for them to showcase that.
Oh.
And it was on the low setting, you got a beautiful flavor out of this thing finally. Holy crap. And so it was actually them coming to us that were like, hey, this is the experience we're having. And we learned we actually made the best battery for live resin. We made the best battery for premium cartridges. And it was really pushing that narrative and simplifying the story that it's the best 510 battery for this. Sure, I can explain it to you after, but taking people through micro adjusting and this and that, that's what makes it really hard for a brand like ours to be in the retail space, because you need somebody who's not only educated on it, but motivated to have the conversation and has charisma to convince somebody to empty their bank accounts for a premium product.
Yeah.
Those that's not that they don't exist. It's just that it's hard to find consistently, especially with the turnover happening in the dispensary.
Mm-hmm.
Your question, I believe, was something to the effect of, how did you know the product was ready?
That's right. Yep.
And there's no, that question is $1 million question. That question, it comes with experience, because nothing's perfect. Since this has been on the market, I've updated it 5 times to fix little things that I found.
Wow.
Anytime we release a product, the blunt box that we're talking about, you learn things, and it's just about being honest with your customers and having a process in place to take back anything that's not working and give back a proper experience. Because if you believe you have the ability to provide that, then you should stand by that. And when it came to our battery, a couple of years, or not even a couple of years, about 6-7 months it was on the market. It wasn't me who first, actually have to give props where props are due. It wasn't me who first proposed the dab tooler. It was actually Nas. So Nas, if you know Nas came to me one day and she was like, "Hey, I think we can make this do this." And I was like, "Yeah, you're 100% right." And then about 3 days later, I had a new design. And then about 2 weeks later, we had our first prototype.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
awesome.
sometimes it's not me. Sometimes it's just having the right people around who have the insights, and just having the processes in place to hear them,
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. That's a great story. You love hearing, how did something come about, right?
Yeah.
I was joking with Wes earlier about I'm going through, okay, I need the battery, I need this, and I'm like, maybe we can convince Drew just to do a dab beginner's kit and just sell
Yeah.
a full kit. But I will say, in a premium category, your pricing is fantastic, especially compared to what I've seen in the market. And we get thrown a lot of, check this out, will you guys promote this? Will you do this? No, we don't promote just for the sake of promoting. We promote in the terms of, we believe in a product and we can stand behind it. That's it. We don't get paid to do it. You're not paying us to be on Legacies. It is a product that we genuinely are curious about and want to know the story behind. But tell me about the blunt box, because I think it was Steven that shared it, but I caught on LinkedIn, you recently tried one of, is it a 5-grammer blunt that he's got? I think that's what it is, right?
3.
A
3-grammer
3-gram
blunt.
hand rolled, so I saw
Loaded
that
with diamonds. It's 2 grams of flour and 1 gram of diamonds, or some craziness like that.
Wow.
Jesus.
Yeah, so I got to get my hands on one of those. Steven's like, "Oh, get with who and so, and they'll hook you up." And I'm like, "Dude, I'll buy it. I'm okay with that. Like, don't worry."
Yeah.
But tell me about the blunt box, because I'm not into the cigars I used to be. But humidors, for those that understand it, humidors are a big thing. Tell us about the blunt box, and what was the cause behind the creation of the blunt box?
So we have other vape technology that we've designed that we're sitting on. I've got,
What? I'm not surprised after this conversation so far.
but okay, this is gonna sound really weird, so I need to explain my words. But the world doesn't need more crap.
I agree.
And as beautiful as this is, at the end of its life cycle, it's gonna be in a garbage, or there's gonna be parts of it that are here and there. And one of the things for me personally that affected me was, when I was doing the designs at Drift, I wasn't prepared for what it meant that my decisions were making hundreds of thousands of things.
Yeah.
It's hard to visualize that, when you're not used to that. When you're like, "Oh, I'll make 100 of these, or I'll make 20 of these." But at the 100,000 game or million unit game, it's not the same story. And I realized very quickly that the decisions I make and the people I make them for are going to have massive consequences in terms of just what gets produced, what doesn't get produced, and why it gets produced. And, I absolutely could have stimulated with another version of the 510, but this one's still pulling its leg. It's still doing its work. So I'm not going to, when I look at The other solutions we have, I love them, and I think some of them are Mona Lisa style. But is that what the world needs right now today? I don't know, maybe. And so I have a hard time doing it just for the sake of doing it. Like, we don't really have a whole lot of TOQI t-shirts we ever give out. I made some TOQI hoodies that were like $160 per hoodie because I cut and sewed them and we made them from scratch. But then people love them more. They fold it up, they put it
Yeah.
on their shelf, and it, So my personal ethos is if I'm going to be creating something or responsible for creating something, then that something has to have a positive impact on the world.
Yeah, I like that.
And that's why cannabis for me was so easy to dive into, because I know how positive the effects are. When it came to the blunt box, I wanted to diversify the next product we created so that it wasn't in the vaporizer category. If you actually look at the breakdown of our products versus the category segments, we started off in vaporizer category, right, with the
Yep.
510. Then we expanded to the concentrate category with the dab cartridge. But we're still not in the dry flower or the pre-roll category, which are much larger market segments to be in.
Mhm.
So question number one from a holistic perspective was, what could we do in that regard? Now, for me, like I said, I consume a large amount of cannabis, and, rolling cannabis, like, it's part of my ritual.
Mhm.
So there's actually on my desk still, there's this rolling tray that just accumulates like that last little bit of cannabis. And it's just this huge pile of stuff that I'm probably not going to smoke, because I know if I do, it's going to be instant comatose,
Yeah.
or like mixture of Frankenstein things.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, when I was a kid, I had a little bit of an aficionado for cigars and cigar boxes very specifically. I just
Cigar
really loved
boxes.
cigar
Yeah.
boxes,
Yeah.
And I loved, even though it wasn't for me, but I loved getting them and organizing them and offering them my dad friends when he came around. Just like that, when you open a cigar box and you have that fresh row of cigars,
Beautiful. It's
it's
beautiful.
beautiful, it's inviting, and
Yeah.
there's really, there's something about that just, there's no stigma,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It
It feels
feels,
curated to you almost, right? Like, yeah.
it feels like Rob Report. It feels
Yeah.
pristine. It feels
Yeah.
like it's an elite activity, right?
Mhm.
And the other question for you, I guess maybe this is the answer to your question, is I knew that this was ready because I knew it worked well enough that I would use it. But I also knew if I put it in the hands of somebody who didn't know what it was, they wouldn't be afraid of it. And it
Right.
would probably invite them to the conversation versus push them away.
Got it.
And with all the product that we create, I want them to be these tokens that destigmatize the industry on their own merit. You don't lock away any of my products. You don't need to. There is no lock on this box because I don't lock the beers in my fridge. Why would I lock this box? That doesn't make sense to
Such
me,
a good point. Good point.
And so a lot of people gave me flack for not having a lock on it, but I don't want to have a lock on it.
Yeah. It's not a stash
So
box.
and that's exactly what it's not. It's
Right.
not made to just store cannabis. It's made to be part of the ritual of the blunt joint pre-roll,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's made out of ashwood. I don't think this one's full up, but it's made out of ashwood. It's got space for 10 products across it. Joints, blunts, pre-rolls, whatever it is that you consume, or whatever your magic is. So rack for all your blunts and joints. You can put that on the side. And then underneath the rack for your blunts, joints, and pre-roll is the rolling tray. And the rolling tray lights up when it comes out of the box. So the way this was designed is that if I am rolling, this light is basically pointing upwards, so that if I have a rolling paper on top of it, it's backlighting my rolling paper.
Oh,
So
wow.
you kind of see what I'm doing, but it's not at all destroying the mood or polluting any
Yeah.
light.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's got this really beautiful curvature. Rust it up here, dump it in here, put it in your thing. Hadass, my designer at the time, she did a fantastic job. We worked on this together. I was trying to teach her at the time we created this how to master 3D shapes. Back to that previous conversations about car design. The reason that cars are different from typical product is they curve in 3 dimensions. And when something curves in 3 dimensions, it's a lot harder to manage those surfaces and manage how everything comes together. And an industry that's mastered that is cars, very specifically Porsche. Porsches have a very embodiment of this thing. So she embarked on a lot of exercises to learn how to surface model to that grade. And I think that was really on our minds when we created this, which contributed to that tray design and also the box design itself. So this is CNC'd ash wood, which is also hand finished. And otherwise you wouldn't be able to get that finishing that you want. I'm gonna kind of turn it away here. Can't really see it because the white light's straight on it, but right now it's flashing yellow because I just opened it. So it's telling us that it's just a little too dry in there.
Oh, wow.
You knock on wood and it turns green and it tells you that it's at the right humidity, but just for cannabis. So unlike cigars, it's about a 10% difference
Yeah.
in the expected humidity levels. So if you're sitting between 55 to 65% relative humidity, then this will go green and you don't have to open it, you know? It's got magnetic
Very cool.
enclosures. I wouldn't like shake this thing around, but it's going to be secure.
Yeah.
So where I really want this to fit is into the consumer who buys that 7 grams, the 14 grams. It's part of their ritual to roll up their own cannabis on Sunday. Go make your purchase. Don't roll up one and then
Yeah.
Monday one, Tuesday one,
Yeah.
bang them
Yeah.
all out, and then they're there. They're there for you to grab. They're there for you to have that cigar box experience. And if somebody comes over to your crib, there is nothing cooler than being like, "Hey,
Yeah.
would you like one?"
Can I
You know,
interest you
it's
in
just
a blunt?
whole different experience of smoking.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And that's what I had said before, where, Wes and I have a lot of these conversations about that stigma, the doob tubes and all these things. And I get it. They come in and you put them back in and they stink if you don't smoke the whole thing. And, but it's this innovation and the spirit behind it, I think truly is where we see the shift, right? So you're talking about, the category, I get it. Vapes and dabs, the concentrates market, extracts market, they're not where flower is yet. But I do think in the future, as more are exposed and the entrants like myself, 30 plus years consuming cannabis, haven't dabbed, right? Have
No.
not dabbed. Now I've used a dab pen, which I don't even consider dabbing, not in the formats that I've had experience with, anyways. But as individuals like myself, or even newcomers, new entrants into the market, have the ability, because they have that expectation, right? Whether they're Apple users or, there's this design influence in their life and they don't necessarily realize it, but they appreciate it. And, with the products that you've brought to market and innovated with, I think that it opens that up where, one, we're decreasing or destigmatizing the industry, right? We're showing that there's advancement, there's innovation. But also you can enjoy it. There's beauty in it. It's art. And
Yeah.
and I think that that's what some miss, where before it was just, form and function. And you look at, and not to discredit, because, Stores and Bickle, these companies, they've been around for a long time. They've done a lot of big things in industry. I don't want to say great because some of them aren't so great too, but they're clunky. They're not necessarily the prettiest thing. You talk about the Volcano. Yeah, I remember the first time I ever saw one, I'm like, what the wait, is this a breathing apparatus? What is going on? It's an anti-breathing apparatus. So I love that you've put so much focus in all of your path leading up to TOQI into the products that we're now seeing. And honestly, for anyone to say, oh, some of these products, and not yours in particular, but just the accessories products, they're so expensive. I can't see myself I'll get a pre-roll today. I'll get a pre-roll. They're not realizing, visit TOQI, right? Visit the website. The pricing is incredible pricing. I too, when we first started, we saw TOQI, right? We researched, we reached out to Jessica, we reached out to you, and we're like, hey guys, let's talk. Let's, can we get you on the podcast? At first I'm like, yeah, I didn't realize they were so attainable, right? I'm thinking wireless technologies, blunt boxes. You worked with the Loud Plug, and we saw, I think that was the big unveil for the blunt box. And I'm like, is it just to hold a blunt? Like, what else is going on here? And then when you're showing us, we're seeing so much more to it. We're seeing, you talk about Porsche 50, and you're talking about your 50-50 weight ratio on your battery. Like, hi, this is a guy to talk to, but you can see it. It's influenced into the products that you've put to market. And that's what I love. I love the story. I love the products. It's incredible, Drew.
Yeah, appreciate that. I get a lot of, one of my mentors, Josh Warner out of California, he really instilled to me that, you want to create things where the juice is watching someone's joy, understanding it and figuring it
Okay.
out, because you don't want to have to sit there and explain everything to people.
Yeah,
But
now
when
push
you-
this button. No, now you got to charge
Yeah,
it. No,
but
you're doing it
like-
wrong. Here, give it to me.
Yeah. But when I can be like, hey, Hey, hang on a sec. Got
Yeah.
nothing. Hold on. It's still air. Oh, here you go. And it's
Yeah.
like this thing, and people are just like, oh shit. I'm like, that's cool. And
Yeah.
it helps you. Oh, that's even cooler. Let's go. And
Yeah.
the analogy I always make, and I've probably said this one too much for anybody else that's heard me speak before, but to bring up your point about dabbing, and is that gonna be what destigmatizes the industry? Wine decanters. If you have a wine decanter, you have this beautiful crystal token for alcoholism in your house, and people come in and they're like, "Oh, that's awesome. Let's get wasted together," and that's like totally normal. But that decanter helps fuel that,
Yeah.
And I think for us, somebody tried to make the argument to me that, oh, well, we already have very expensive centerpieces. Like I have a $20,000 dab rig, and I was like, bro, if your $20,000 dab rig was gonna destigmatize the industry, it would have done it already.
Yeah.
And so I think
Oh my God.
it's having these conversations, but also just providing tools for that conversation to happen automatically, and to help those people transition from that one solution to our solution. You got to give them cool shit.
Yeah, well, no doubt, no doubt, and I think that's how you do it, right? But it's also having the conversation, and I've said to Wes, I'm not the type that's going to, and I don't have it in a bar situation either, where there's decanters and there's fancy steins and there's all these things sitting out. Just like I don't have bongs and dab rigs and all these things sitting out. I have a Happle. Managed to get my hands on a Happle, and I enjoy that. But listen,
Is that the
dude,
Happle that Nugs uses?
that's right.
Yeah,
That's
they're
right.
awesome.
Oh man, I love that thing. I was
Master
like,
Glass. Yeah, the
no, it's
Master
really funny. I wasn't sure if today was like a smoking thing or non-smoking thing.
can be whatever you want.
But I have my Happle. I was gonna smoke that. I was like,
Yeah.
shout out shout out CeeLo and the guys from Nugs and Tribal.
Yeah,
They're always
yeah.
nice to us.
Oh, they're great. And I think Nico's got a new and not necessarily improved because the Apple works perfectly. They have one now where you can change so you're not putting your hash piece in. You can actually put, I don't think it's for dabs, but it's probably for dry herb. You can actually insert like just a small bowl with it now. So you can use it.
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
yeah. It's a bit bigger, but interesting. I just love seeing new products, right?
Yeah.
But my friend, listen, you've come a long way since hash in a pop can. C plus, grape C plus. Is that what you
Grape
said?
C
it was?
plus.
To
Grape C plus.
the incredible products that you now have available. It's an awesome story. I love it. We want to make sure that everyone understands it and can partake with TOQI. I think that's the best way to do it. But before we wrap anything up, we've been doing something fun with our guests lately. What we do is we have the previous week guest pose a question to the incoming guest, not our idea or concept. I think, was it Jordan Peterson maybe that started that? Anyways, doesn't matter. And then you get to pose a guest to next week's, a question to next week's guest without knowing who they are. So last week's guest did not know it was you coming in. And I think this is a good one, right, Wes? It's very appropriate.
I can't wait to ask this question.
Yeah, this is going to be a wild one. So we'll ask you a question from, who do we have on last week again?
Last week was Grant Caton from Light
Grant
Label.
Caton, right, yeah.
So his question last week, Drew, was, what's the best piece of advice you've been given so far from two perspectives? One from just a personal, personal perspective, and one from a business perspective. And I think I want to tweak that question a little bit personally myself on the business side to what's the best piece of advice you've kind of been given from an entrepreneurial perspective? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I think, I don't know, maybe it's the personal one, but I would say that nobody's right 100% of the time. And, if you actually take that on board and you accept that in any situation, as right as you think you are, there is a potential chance that you could not be right. It just really forces you to focus and listen to what it is the other person is saying, and to validate what they're saying and try and actually live their experiences. I think in today's divisive world of left and right and wars and everything, I think everybody is a product of their own experiences. And I think even if they're not experiences that you agree with, if you can understand somebody having that opinion, then maybe you're not even having a conversation about right and wrong anymore. So that really helped me grow up a lot and help me deal with some situations. I actually think that was probably a professional one. I think that came out of a Ray Dalio book that I read. That he was talking about that, you're just not going to be right all the time, and you know where to deal with that. I think from a business perspective, I would say, well, you always need more money than you think you do.
Yeah, it's like building a fire in a pile of firewood.
Yeah. So find and surround yourself with as many A players as you can who are going to tell you to your face they think you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have people around you who are going to challenge you and tell you you're right or wrong, you're screwed. And if you don't have A players around, it's going to take you 10 times as long and cost you 20 times as much. And so, bite the bullet, be humble. People surround yourself with people you think are smarter than you. And I think that's for me in my life of just little crazy child thinking I'm so smart and blah, 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 blah. I guess to round off this conversation, for all high and mighty as the conversations we're having and all the awards and shit, I can't eat an award. My child can't eat an award, I actually don't spend too much time thinking about those things because if I'm honest, they don't really bring me joy. It brought me joy when it happened to be validated. And yes, it brings me joy to know those capabilities were third-party validated. But from a business perspective, none of that pays my bill anymore. And so the last thing I would say is a lesson my friend Lee Botkins, who runs Global Street Art in the UK, said is that, all his awards are in a box somewhere that he doesn't even care about because none of that is going to help make his team be millionaires and feed everybody he needs to feed.
Yeah.
So it's almost like not getting complacent because you have those things and just feeling like you need to be hungry enough to go get more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dude, I've never really heard it put that way. So coming from my days in advertising, there was two mindsets, right? There was one where you typically see your Clios and such stuffed in lions, golden pencils. They're stuffed into boxes, maybe in the storage room under desks. And then the opposite side of that was you'd see them on display. And in cases where you've just mentioned, like you can't eat an award, Wes, we just found the title of this episode. You're very right? You can't. And in some cases, I see where companies can use those awards, right? They're not necessarily personal, but it's a company where it's an accolade. And in the world of advertising, it's drawing more clients. Oh my God, they want a pencil. They want a Clio. But you're right. Out of all the awards any of us have ever won, I don't remember ever sitting down and going, this just paid for this meal, or it didn't pay for the meal. We have to eat this medal today, right?
Yeah.
So it's not happening. And I think that, looking through your history and those accolades, you've managed to be humble enough to understand that. And that takes something because, right out of the gate, we had talked and you said, and I still do. And I still think I'm smart and you should. But you're a humble dude. And I don't think that you're putting that prominence on that enough yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that what you've accomplished, what you can accomplish, who you've worked with and what you want to do and achieve. And you're smart enough to do it. But I think for yourself is you are genuinely humble to the point where you want to create sustainable products. You want products to be out there that are going to last. People aren't wasting their money on it, but it's also, it's drawing a conversation and it's allowing a conversation to happen rather than it's just something. It's just something, right? And that's what I love. I love about you and your story and about, your current company. God knows where you're going to be in the next 5 years, 10 years.
You want to know? I can tell you.
Tell us.
No, I think, and as a continuation of this last conversation, I think part of the reason I have that mindset is because I know what I'm working on and I know its value and I know the size of that prize. And I'm just so much now more excited by that I don't think about anything in the past. I just think this thing that's coming up is so big and so important to our industry and so changing that it's worthy of my time. And I say that not being this god all whatever. I just say that as for anybody who's on this planet, you only have time.
That's right.
That's it. That's all you get.
That's it.
Money comes and goes. Your health is paramount. Anybody you've talked to will tell you that who's worth anything. But like, it's the time invested in stuff that you think about. And like, even case in point, when it comes back to thinking about how long it took that cannabis amnesty partnership to unfold, it took us years and change to find the right thing to do and all this stuff. I don't think about the Clio Award. I think about the two individuals we hired, the size of the smiles on their face, and just that it was something real for someone.
Yeah.
And I felt like that did something.
Yeah.
That I get happiness from that. And I think, and that's selfish happiness, because, here's the question for your next week person is, are there truly any selfish acts?
Yeah.
And maybe that's not the question to use, but the reason I bring that up is because, sure, those awards are great, and sure, we do all these things, but it makes me feel good to help people. I'll be honest about it.
Yeah.
So,
it does feel good. It just reminds me of a Friends episode. It was, I think, Joey and Phoebe going on, well, there's no such thing as a selfless act. That's what it was. But that's a good one.
So one last point on that is, my background's hardware, but I also told you that my foundation is software. And the current industry, sure, could use better, faster, quicker mousetraps. But there's going to be those next year, no regardless of what I do, whether it's mine, whether it's somebody else's. Ours will be awesome. Some other people's will be awesome. Some people's will be shit. But I've realized that what it is I have to offer and I have to give this world and this industry is using my talent to artistically find solutions for problems. And the problem I had when we started out was we needed to build a company and we needed to prove we could. And we did that off the 510. And we've proven that we should have a company with the revenue we've generated in the past couple of years. But I'm now in an industry where there's no legitimate rhyme or reason for a bud tender, a doctor, or a person to recommend a product for me that is actually accepted universally. And we live in a world with abundance of data, and I absolutely have the ability to help people understand what products are right for them. And I am pursuing that.
Awesome.
Exciting.
Looking forward to that. So is that, wait, when we had our last meeting, Wes, it was the Da Vinci Code. You cracked the Da Vinci Code. I don't know how many blunts deep you were into it, but maybe this has something to do with it. I don't know, but I'm excited. Okay, look at that. See, there we go. But you're right. And this is part of the reason that we started High Flyer, why we started Legacies was, we get it. You go into a dispensary and you may be a newcomer. I mean, again, 30 plus years of consuming cannabis, I go in and I'm completely overwhelmed. I'll go in with, I think I want this. I think I want that, but I'm not relying on a bud tender. And these poor bud tenders in industry, they can't make all the recommendations in the world. They're not necessarily going to make sure that you have the product that you're looking for, nor can a doctor, because there's just not enough studies. But data don't lie.
Data don't lie. And at the end of the day, like, just because White Widow made me feel energetic has absolutely no bearing on how it's going to make you feel. And we all accept that.
Right.
Yet I walked into, I forget which dispensary it was, and they're like, what do you want, indica or sativa? I was like, you and I both know that doesn't matter. He's like, but it does. The makeup of the plant will change this and that. And I was like, it will change it, but that doesn't explain to you how that's going to impact me personally, does it? He was like, no. I was like, okay. So back to my answer, just give me something banging.
Yeah, exactly. And then you go one step further, which is what used to infuriate me about Leafly was White Widow was just a review of White Widow. And I'm like, dude, was it this person who grew it? What nutrient regime were they using? Was it living soil? Was it organic? Did they do this? Did they do this? Everything is changing. And who is the breeder? Was it an original land race we're talking about? Like, what are we talking about here?
Exactly.
So I'm excited for what you're going to be doing. If you need any input, meaning give it.
You guys on the test program?
There we go. Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Got a good one coming up. People are gonna love it.
You're a class act, man. Just absolutely love having the conversation with you. I wish we could spend all day, and we will. in the future. As soon as we get up there, we'll hang and do whatever we can do.
100%.
But
Take you out for dinner when you come this way.
I love it. I love it. Well, listen, man, much continued success. We know that you'll have it. We're looking forward to the next project as well. Go Ferrari. We'll say that as
Hey.
well.
You're
But
weird that
also,
now that I'm hearing it, but yeah, okay, I'll still stick by that answer.
No, it's fine. It's a fine answer. It's a fine
it's
answer.
a fine answer. It's a fine answer. We appreciate you, Drew. We appreciate you joining Legacies and sharing your story with our audience, man. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. You guys are great. Looking forward to catching one together. And I would be remiss of my media trading if I didn't say that you can catch us at mytoqui.com, MYTOQI. And you can find me on LinkedIn, and looking forward to the future. If anybody's got some thoughts on what I just said at the end there, happy to hit me up in the DMs and we can take some conversation.
There we go. Love it. Well, what do you think, Wes?
I think we need another couple of hours to cover everything we could have.
Yeah, I gotta go I love him. Can I just say it that way? I'm gonna go read a whole bunch more books now. I'm gonna study a bunch more designers. I'm gonna reinvigorate my passion for F1. I got really into it. We all did, actually. Tanya, Ashton, and I were watching it constantly, all the races. And I think for me, obviously, Drew's experience with that is from a design and engineering perspective. For me, I look at it as the big business, right? Companies spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make very little.
Yeah, I think that business is the ultimate lesson in business from everything, like the logistics of it.
The logistics are
fucking
phenomenally outrageous, like just crazy. But it's nice to see Drew's progression through the years, his experience obviously influencing what he's doing now. But there's a genuineness, there's that spirit of genuineness there that, creating sustainable products, creating better products, creating, products that people want to enjoy. That also part of our mission, trying to destigmatize the industry. And he made a really good point that I never thought of was about, wine decanters, right? Like we set these out like they're, oh, look at this, did I pour you a glass of wine, right? But you throw a dab rig under the table and you guys want to get blitzed?
Yeah, I think
oh my God.
Lack of lock on those TOQI boxes was an interesting detail as well that would never have crossed my mind of there's a purpose for it not having a box, and that is stigma related. It is not something that's supposed to be locked away. It's I thought that was genius.
Yeah, I don't have a lock on the beer fridge, right? There's not really much beer in the beer fridge, but I don't. So it's a good point, but I'm glad we finally got to connect. I know it's been difficult. He's got a crazy schedule. They're everywhere. But I think it would be lost on me not to at least promote the fact that people need to at least take interest in what TOQI is doing. Black founded, owned company here in Canada doing incredible work. Like, come on. Like, it just makes sense, right?
And their products realistically are I don't want to say cheap, but they're like compared to some of the other offerings that are plus a couple $100.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get our hands on it. Try it out. We'll report back. That's for sure.
That's it.
Yeah, definitely a place I'm willing to put my money for sure. Anyways, been a great episode, and we're looking forward to next week's intriguing guest, because that question that Drew has is one that I won't forget. That's for sure. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your support with Legacies. Until next week.